Before we get into this story, if you love Family Feud moments where karma shows up on live television, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on that notification bell because we post stories like this every week, and I promise you, this one is going to leave you stunned. They say karma does not have a deadline. It does not send a warning. It does not knock first. It just arrives, usually at the worst possible moment for the person who earned it. And on Family Feud in April 2025, karma arrived on schedule. A husband who had been carrying on an affair for 2 years thought he could walk onto a game show stage, stand next to his wife, and perform the role of a faithful family man for one more afternoon. He had been getting away with it for so long that he thought he was untouchable. But what he did not count on was the game itself. Because Family Feud has a way of pulling the truth out of people, even people who have spent years burying it. When one question hit a nerve that this man could not control, his mouth betrayed him before his brain could stop it. And when his wife, who had been standing 3 feet behind him, heard what came out of his mouth, everything changed. She did not scream. She did not cry. She connected the dots in real time, on camera in front of 200 people. And when Harvey realized what was unfolding on his stage, he did something he rarely does. He stopped being a host and started being a man. Because what happened next was not a game show moment. It was justice, purpose, build deep emotional connection through detailed backstory, and establish the wife's sacrifice alongside the husband's betrayal. Craig and Tamara Holloway had been married for 18 years. They lived in a 2-story colonial in Decatur, Georgia, a suburb just east of Atlanta, in a neighborhood full of old trees and families who had known each other for generations. The house had been Tamara's dream. She had found it when their oldest was still a baby, and she had spent 18 years turning it into a home. Every room had her touch. The kitchen had been remodeled with tile she had picked out during a trip to Savannah. The backyard had a garden she tended every weekend. The front porch had a swing that she and Craig used to sit on every evening when the kids were small, watching fireflies and talking about the life they were building together. They had not sat on that swing together in over a year. Tamara was 43 years old. She worked as a pharmacy technician at a CVS near their home, a job she had taken 15 years ago when their second child was born because the hours were flexible enough to let her be home when the school bus arrived. Before that, she had been studying for her pharmacist license. She had been only 1 year away from finishing when Craig told her they could not afford for her to keep going to school and raise 2 kids at the same time. He said one of them needed to work full-time and one of them needed to be with the children, and since his career as a claims adjuster at an insurance company was already established, it made sense for her to pause. Tamara paused. She never went back. She put her textbooks in a box in the garage and went to work at CVS and never mentioned it again. That was 15 years ago, and Craig had never once acknowledged what she had given up. Craig was 45. He worked as a senior claims adjuster at a mid-sized insurance firm in downtown Atlanta. The job paid well and gave him the kind of predictable, corporate stability that Tamara had always appreciated. But 2 years ago, Craig had been promoted to a position that required more travel. Regional meetings, client visits, training seminars. The trips started at once a month and had gradually increased to 2 or 3 times a month. Tamara had noticed, but had not questioned it. She trusted Craig. She had always trusted Craig. He was a deacon at their church. He coached their son's baseball team. He called his mother every Sunday. He was the kind of man that people used as an example when they talked about what a good husband looked like. They had 3 children. 17-year-old Cameron was a junior in high school with a 3.8 GPA and dreams of studying architecture at Georgia Tech. 15-year-old Nia was a sophomore who danced competitively and had already won 2 regional championships. And 11-year-old Micah was a 6th grader who loved building things with his hands and spent every Saturday morning at the kitchen table constructing elaborate models out of balsa wood. These children were everything to Tamara. Every sacrifice she had made, every dream she had set aside, every extra shift she had picked up at CVS to cover the bills when Craig's bonuses did not come through had been for them. Tamara's mother, 68-year-old Vivian Cole, lived alone in a small house in East Point, about 20 minutes from Tamara's home. Vivian was a retired bus driver for MTA, the Atlanta public transit system. She had driven the number 40, two-bus route for 26 years, and could still tell you the name of every regular who rode her bus during the morning shift. Vivian was a small woman with sharp eyes and a voice that could fill a room without being raised. She had been suspicious of Craig for the better part of a year. Nothing specific, just the little things that a woman who has lived 68 years notices. The way Craig's stories about work trips had gotten more detailed over time, as if he was rehearsing them. The way he kept his phone face down at the dinner table. The way he smiled a little too quickly when Tamara asked where he had been. Vivian had not said anything to Tamara because she did not have proof, and Vivian was the kind of woman who did not make accusations without evidence, but she was watching. She had been watching for a long time. The Family Feud appearance had been organized by their church group. The pastor had submitted the application as a community-building exercise, and the Holloway family had been selected along with 4 other church members to form the team. Craig had been enthusiastic about the idea. Tamara had been less certain, but she had gone along with it because the children were excited, and because she had spent 18 years going along with things for the sake of her family's happiness. What nobody knew was that Craig's affair had started with a woman named Renee, a paralegal he had met at a conference in Savannah. For 2 years, Craig had been seeing Renee during his work trips, using the company travel as cover. He had bought a separate phone that he kept locked in his car. He had created a separate email account. He had built an entire compartment of his life that existed in a parallel universe to his family, and he had walked onto that Family Feud stage believing, with the arrogance of a man who had been getting away with it for 2 years, that he could continue the performance for one more afternoon. Purpose? Build emotional investment as Craig's own answers betray him and Tamara pieces together the truth in real time. The game begins. The Holloway family's church team, which they called the Grace family, was matched against the Coleman family from Montgomery, Alabama. The first few rounds were smooth. The church team played well. Craig was charming and confident, cracking jokes with Steve Harvey and getting laughs from the audience. When Steve asked about the family, Craig put his arm around Tamara and told the cameras she was the love of his life. He said, "Everything I do for this woman and these kids." Tamara smiled. The audience clapped. Vivian, sitting in the 5th row, did not clap. She just watched. The first slip the trouble started in round 2. Steve read the question. Name a city known for romantic getaways. Craig was at the podium for the face-off. He buzzed in before the Coleman contestant and said, without hesitation, Savannah. It was on the board. Number 4 answer. The game moved on. Nobody thought anything of it. But Tamara's head tilted slightly. Craig's work trips were mostly to Birmingham and Nashville. He had never mentioned Savannah as a work destination. So why was it the first city that came to his mind when someone said romantic getaway? She filed it away. Not consciously. More like the way a person's brain flags something that does not quite match the pattern. The next round was uneventful. The Grace family swept the board and built a comfortable lead. Craig was riding high. He was loving the attention, loving the lights, loving being the star of the show. And then Steve read the question that would change everything. The question, round 4. Face off between Craig and Denise Coleman. Steve looked at the card. Name something a cheating husband accidentally leaves in his car. The audience laughed. It was a classic Family Feud question designed to get funny, dramatic answers. Denise Coleman buzzed in first and said, "Perfume that is not his wife's." Good answer. Number 2 on the board. Then it was Craig's turn, and this is where the affair backfired. Craig did not freeze. He did not panic. He did something worse. He answered instantly, with complete confidence, the way a person answers a question about something they know from experience rather than imagination. He said, "A second phone." Number 1 answer. The board lit up. 43 points. The audience cheered. Craig pumped his fist. He turned to his team and grinned, and then he made the mistake of looking at Tamara. Tamara was not cheering. She was standing perfectly still, her arms at her sides, Her eyes locked on Craig with an intensity that made the smile melt off his face in real time. Because Tamara had just connected two dots that had been floating around in her mind for months. 6 weeks ago, she had gone to Craig's car to look for a charger and had found a phone tucked under the driver's seat. It was powered off. She had assumed it was an old work phone he had forgotten about. She had even mentioned it to him casually, and he had said it was a backup phone the company gave him in case his primary broke. She had believed him. But now, standing on a game show stage, she had just watched her husband answer a question about what a cheating husband leaves in his car by naming the exact item she had found in his car 6 weeks ago. And he had answered it the way people answer questions they know by heart. The pieces fall into place. The game continued, but Tamara was somewhere else. Her body was on the stage. Her mind was running through 2 years of details that she had accepted without question and was now examining under a completely different light. The trips that got longer. The phone always faced down. Savannah, the second phone. The nights he came home and went straight to the shower. The weekend he said he had a training seminar and she called the hotel and they had no reservation under his name. He had explained that away too. He always explained everything away, and she had always let him. Craig could feel the temperature change. He kept glancing at Tamara, trying to make eye contact, but she would not look at him. She was answering questions mechanically now, getting them right but with none of the energy she had brought earlier. Her face had gone still in a way that anyone who has been married for a long time would recognize. It was the face of a person doing math in their head, adding up years of small inconsistencies and arriving at a total that made her stomach turn. The Grace family won the game and qualified for fast money. The team celebrated. Cameron, Nia, and Micah were jumping up and down. The church members on the team were hugging each other. Craig reached for Tamara to pull her into a hug, and she stepped back. Not dramatically. Just enough. Just far enough that his hand caught air instead of her shoulder. He looked at her. She looked back at him. And in that look was everything. Every suspicion. Every explained away excuse. Every late night and every locked phone and every trip to cities she had never been told about. It was all there in her eyes, and Craig knew it. Tamara speaks. Steve was setting up for fast money when Tamara stepped to the center of the stage. She did not ask for the microphone. She did not make an announcement. She simply stood in a place where she could be heard and spoke directly to Craig in a voice that was calm, measured, and absolutely devastating. 6 weeks ago, I found a phone under your seat. You told me it was a company backup. Just now, Steve asked what a cheating husband leaves in his car, and before anyone else could blink, you said a second phone. Not a receipt, not a lipstick, a second phone. The exact thing I found in your car, and you said it like you were reading from a manual. The studio went silent. Craig's face drained of color. The charming deacon, the baseball coach, the man who told the cameras that everything he did was for his family, stood on the stage looking like a man who had just been told the building was on fire and all the exits were locked. Tamara continued. You have been going to Savannah. Not for work. The romantic getaway question. You said Savannah before you even thought about it. You have never taken me to Savannah, Craig. Not once in 18 years, but that is where your mind went when someone said romance. So I am asking you right now, in front of our children, in front of our church family, in front of Steve Harvey and everybody watching, who is in Savannah, Craig? 200 people held their breath. Cameron, the 17-year-old, had gone rigid. Nia was looking at her mother with wide, frightened eyes. Micah, the 11-year-old, had grabbed the arm of the church member standing next to him. In the 5th row, Vivian sat with her hands folded in her lap and her chin raised. She was not surprised. She was waiting. Purpose. Steve's powerful reaction, Craig's unraveling, community response, and justice served. Steve Harvey reacts. Steve Harvey had been standing near the fast money podium when Tamara spoke. He turned slowly and looked at Craig. Then he looked at the audience. Then he walked to the center of the stage, positioned himself between the couple, and said something that the audience would later describe as the moment the show stopped being a show and became something real. I have hosted this game for a long time, and I have always said that this game reveals who you are. You cannot hide on this stage. The questions are designed to pull out instinct, and instinct does not lie. Your brain might lie, your mouth might lie. But your instinct, the first thing that comes out when you do not have time to think, that is the truth. And Craig, your instinct just told on you in front of everybody? The audience erupted. Not in celebration, in recognition. Every person in that room understood exactly what Steve was saying. The game had done what 2 years of careful deception could not undo. It had bypassed Craig's defenses and pulled the truth straight out of his subconscious. Steve continued. Tamara asked you a question, Craig, and I think everybody in this room and everybody watching at home deserves to hear you answer it. Not with one of your explanations. Not with a story. With the truth. Because your wife just figured out in 60 seconds what you have been hiding for how long. How long, Craig? Craig unravels. Craig stood on that stage, and the performance finally ended. There was nowhere left to go. No story left to tell. No explanation that could cover what had just happened. He looked at Tamara, then at the floor, then at his children. Cameron had turned his back. Nia was crying silently. Micah was looking at his father with an expression that no 11-year-old should ever have to wear, the expression of a child watching the ground open beneath him. 2 years. Craig said quietly. It has been 2 years. Tamara closed her eyes. She did not gasp. She did not cry. She just closed her eyes and took a single deep breath, the way a person does when something they suspected is finally confirmed, and the confirmation is both devastating and, in some terrible way, a relief. Because now she knew. Now there was no more wondering, no more explaining away, no more choosing to believe. The truth was out, and the truth, as brutal as it was simpler than the lies had been. Her name is Renee. Craig continued, his voice barely audible. She lives in Savannah. I met her at a conference. I do not have an excuse. I am not going to stand here and give you one because there is no excuse for what I did. I had everything. I had a wife who gave up her career for me. I had 3 kids who looked up to me. I had a church that trusted me, and I threw it all away because I was selfish. That is the truth. I was selfish, and I am sorry. Vivian's moment. Vivian Cole stood up in the 5th row, 68 years old, retired bus driver, 5 feet 3 inches tall. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. When Vivian Cole spoke, rooms got quiet because people could feel that what was coming was worth hearing. Craig Holloway, I drove a bus in this city for 26 years. You know what I learned driving a bus? I learned that people show you who they are by how they act when they think nobody important is watching. For 18 years, I have watched you. I watched you smile at my daughter while your eyes were somewhere else. I watched you take her dream of becoming a pharmacist and put it in a box in the garage so you could have your comfortable life. And I watched you walk into my daughter's church every Sunday and shake the pastor's hand with the same hands you used to betray your family. She paused. The studio was completely silent. Vivian continued. My daughter gave up her education for you. She gave up her ambition for you. She gave up 15 years of her professional life so you could have a wife at home and a career to be proud of. And what did you give her in return? Lies. Trips to Savannah. A phone hidden under the seat. You did not just cheat on my daughter, Craig. You cheated her out of the life she was supposed to have. Steve Harvey pressed his hand against his chest. His eyes were red. He pointed at Vivian and said, That woman right there just said the most important thing that has ever been said on my stage. She did not just call out the affair. She called out the theft. Because that is what it is when you take someone's potential and use it to fund your own comfort. It is theft. And Miss Vivian, your daughter's potential was not lost. It was just put on hold. And something tells me the hold is about to end. Tamara's response. Tamara opened her eyes. She looked at Craig for a long time, and then she did something that surprised everyone in that studio. She did not yell. She did not storm off. She walked to the family lineup, put her arms around her 3 children, and spoke directly to them. I want you to know that this does not change who you are. You are still the same brilliant, talented, beautiful people you were when you walked in here. What happened between your father and me is between him and me. But I promise you, from this moment forward, there will be no more lies in this family. Not from anyone. We are starting over, and we are starting with the truth." Then she turned back to Craig. "You said you are sorry. I believe that you are sorry you got caught. Whether you are sorry for what you did, I do not know yet. But I do know this. 15 years ago, I put my dreams in a box because you asked me to. Tonight, I am going home and I am taking that box out of the garage. Whatever happens with this marriage, I am not putting myself on hold for anybody ever again." The audience gave Tamara a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. People were crying. People were cheering. Steve Harvey stood beside her and said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. The moment belonged entirely to her. Purposely reinforce the moral lesson, show lasting impact, and deliver universal application. After the stage, the Grace family did not play fast money. The pastor who had organized the trip stepped forward and said a prayer over both families, the Holloways and the Colemans, right there on the stage. Steve Harvey bowed his head. The audience bowed their heads. It was a moment of collective grace in the middle of what had been a devastating afternoon. Afterward, Steve walked Tamara and the children to the backstage area personally. He pulled Tamara aside and told her something she would later share in an interview. He said, "Tamara, go get those textbooks out of the garage. It is not too late. It is never too late." The episode airs. When the episode aired 7 weeks later, it became a phenomenon. The clip of Craig's instinctive answers betraying his affair was shared over 5 million times. Body language experts analyzed the moment Tamara connected the dots in real time. Relationship therapists used the clip to illustrate what they called subconscious leaking, the phenomenon where a person's true experiences slip out through instinctive answers, unguarded word choices, and automatic responses. Craig's answers had been textbook examples. Savannah for romantic getaways, a second phone for what a cheating husband leaves in his car. His instincts had told the truth that his carefully constructed performance had been hiding for 2 years. Vivian's speech about Craig cheating Tamara out of the life she was supposed to have became one of the most shared moments from any Family Feud episode that year. Her distinction between cheating on someone and cheating someone out of their potential resonated with millions of viewers. It was quoted in articles about the hidden costs of infidelity, the ones that go beyond the relationship itself and extend to the sacrificed careers, abandoned educations, and deferred dreams that so often accompany a spouse's betrayal. What happened to Tamara? Tamara filed for divorce 2 months after the episode aired. It was not a decision she made in anger. It was a decision she made in clarity. She told a reporter that the Family Feud stage had given her something she had not had in 18 years, a moment where the truth was undeniable. And once the truth was undeniable, the choice became simple. She was not going to rebuild a life on a foundation that had been rotted from the inside for 2 years. True to her word, Tamara went home that night and pulled the box of pharmacy textbooks out of the garage. They were dusty and the editions were out of date, but she held them in her hands and cried in a way she had not cried in years. Not tears of sadness, tears of recognition. She was looking at the woman she was supposed to become. Within 3 months, Tamara had enrolled in a pharmacy program at Mercer University. She studied while working. She studied after the kids went to bed. She studied on her lunch breaks at CVS. And 15 months after that Family Feud taping, at the age of 44, Tamara Holloway passed her pharmacy licensing exam. She posted a photo of herself holding the certificate on social media with a single caption, 15 years late, right on time. The post was shared over 2 million times. Steve Harvey reposted it on his own accounts with a message that said, "I told her to get those textbooks out of the garage. She did. And now she is doctored. Holloway to you." Tamara was not a doctor technically, but nobody corrected Steve, because the spirit of what he said was exactly right. The follow-up 6 months after the episode, Family Feud aired a follow-up segment. Tamara appeared on screen from her new apartment, a bright 2-bedroom near Mercer's campus. She looked transformed, not in a dramatic Hollywood makeover way, in the quiet way that a person looks when they are finally living a life that belongs to them. She spoke calmly about the divorce, the pharmacy program, and the daily reality of rebuilding from scratch. "The hardest part was not losing the marriage," she said. The hardest part was admitting that I had been so busy holding someone else's life together that I had forgotten I had one of my own. That Family Feud stage did not just expose my husband's affair. It exposed the lie I had been telling myself that my dreams did not matter as long as everyone else was taken care of. They do matter, and it is not too late. Vivian appeared in the segment, filmed at her home in East Point. She was sitting on her front porch wearing house slippers and drinking sweet tea. She looked at the camera and said, "My baby is going to be a pharmacist. I always knew she could do it. I just had to wait for one bus to leave the stop before the next one could pull in." Steve Harvey watched the segment with his studio audience and said it was the best follow-up he had ever seen. He said Tamara Holloway's journey from a pharmacy textbook box in a garage to a pharmacy license in her hand was the single greatest comeback story in the history of his show. The lasting impact Tamara's story became a symbol for women who had put their ambitions on hold for the sake of their families. Her phrase, 15 years late, right on time, became a rallying cry. Women across the country posted their own versions, sharing photos of degrees earned in their 40s and 50s. Businesses started after decades of supporting someone else's career, and dreams unpacked from their own metaphorical boxes in the garage. Tamara was invited to speak at women's events and graduation ceremonies. She always wore her pharmacy coat, and she always told the same story. She told them about a box of textbooks, a game show question, and the day she realized that the only person who could give her permission to live her own life was herself. Steve Harvey closed the follow-up segment with words that stayed with viewers long after the credits. Craig Holloway's affair backfired on that stage. His own instincts gave him away. But here is what I want everybody to remember. The real story is not the affair. The real story is the woman who stood in the wreckage of her marriage and instead of falling apart, picked up a box of textbooks and started building a life that was hers. That is not revenge. That is not recovery. That is resurrection. And Tamara Holloway did not need anybody's permission to rise. Hatsiel Tituan, Silo Sinji. If Tamara's comeback inspired you, if Vivian's wisdom moved you, then please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Share this story with someone who has a box of their own sitting in the garage, someone who needs to hear that it is never too late. We bring you stories like this every single week, real moments of truth, family, and strength from the Family Feud stage. And remember what Tamara taught us, 15 years late is still right on time. Go get your textbooks. See you in the next one.